Hey friends, if you like the Nexus Podcast, the best way to continue the learning is to join our community. There are 3 ways to do that. First, you can join the Nexus Pro membership. It's our global community of smart building professionals. We have monthly events, paywall deep dive content, and a private chat room, and it's just $35 a month. Second, you can upgrade from the Pro membership to our courses offering. It's headlined by our flagship course, The Smart Building Strategist, and we're building a catalog of courses taught by world-leading experts on each topic under the Smart Buildings umbrella. Third, and finally, our marketplace is how we connect leading vendors with buyers looking for their solutions. The links are below in the show notes, and now let's go on to the podcast. Welcome back to the Nexus Podcast. It's James. I have Brad with me.
Hello.
We also have Tom Balme here today, second time podcast guest. He's the National Building Services and Technology Manager at Lendlease. Welcome, Tom.
Good to see you all. Thanks again for having me.
Last time you were on the show, you were with Bryce, I think.
It was. That must have been 3 or 4 years ago now.
Yeah, it was a while ago. We talked about tech-enabled services, which is what we've named it now, but back then we didn't even have a name for it.
No, yeah, that was all around sort of FDD and changing service contracts and the difficulties of trying to get BMS vendors to sort of change their contracts. And it's funny, like since that point, it's like most building owners over here have now sort of gone down that journey, and they actually hired Bryce as well. So Bryce has probably done better out of that than anybody else.
We'll put that episode in the show notes. It's probably still relevant, like based on how slow things move in our industry. It's probably still great for people that are looking at renewing their service contract. So you were fresh off of coming to the States for NexusCon. Somehow it's been 2 months since then. I don't understand how that's true. But thanks for making the journey all the way over to see us. And you won the Mic Drop Nexi Award. Can you fill the audience in on why you won the Mic Drop Nexi Award?
I think you were just sort of calling out to the audience, and I think for some reason you kind of picked me out, and the discussion had sort of got to explaining more around what sales and marketing fluff is, and then I think you just sort of called me out and said, Tom, can you help answer this question? And then I think I got a little bit Australian on the answer and just sort of said, well, it's sales and marketing bullshit.
Yes.
And that was it. And then
we were trying to define what fluff was for the newcomer building owners in the room, and you helped us. Yes, you helped us.
Yes. Provided a small bit of guidance into what fluff really means. Yeah, no, I think I was sitting next to Chris from Walmart. I think he just sort of like gave me a pat on the back, and I think he used another word to describe it, which we probably won't share.
Yeah.
You won Mic Drop beyond just that moment, though. Every time you were on stage, you had something spicy to say, which is, what we were aiming for. So it was more than one sentence. Give yourself some credit.
Yes. We'll talk about, you gave 2 presentations. We'll talk about those in just a second. Let's do a quick overview of what's going on in the Nexus community. People probably haven't heard from us much lately. We've been deep in the workshop, getting ready for 2026. One thing is, we're recording this tomorrow after we record this. So by the time this recording comes out, our early bird ticket sale will be live for NexusCon 2026. And so we actually have dropped the early bird price. So if you're on the vendor side and we forced you to buy tickets, we're giving away $999 tickets, which is way cheaper than it will be if you wait till later in the year. And so that is live on our website now. What else, Brad?
We are going to announce the location as well with the early bird ticket drop. Do you want to fill them in on location?
Yeah. We're gonna start moving NexusCon to cities where we can more deeply integrate the conference into the local building owner community. And so we're starting with Detroit, Michigan. And we're really excited about all the building owners there. We can't announce anything yet, but we're basically starting a new era of NexusCon where, if we think about the first 2 years, right, we were in a suburb of Denver, which is great, and we had a lot of building owners there. But we were a little bit disconnected from the actual fabric of the community. And so moving to Detroit kind of starts a new era for the conference where we're focused on actual deep partnerships. When we hear case studies, when we, go to a building, well, actually just take the building that the conference is in. It is owned by Bedrock, and Bedrock's going to be at the conference, right? So it's like they're our host. And so the vibe is going to shift a little bit to where we're not just talking about abstract ideas. We're talking about how technology is actually transforming a specific city. And so that's kind of the new era we're headed into.
I'm excited about the venue too. Like this is like a brand new state of the art building, which I think is going to kind of level up the whole thing as well. It's called the Department at Hudson's. If you like Google Maps Detroit, Michigan, I think the pin, if you just put Detroit, almost lands directly on the venue. Like we're in the heart of everything. It's right where things are going on. And yeah, like you said, James, like just the fact that we're going to be talking about buildings it's not going to be like hypothetical anymore. It's going to be like, yeah, we're talking about those buildings right there, or this building that we're in, or, that guy manages the building across the street. It's going to change the vibe a little. I think it's going to really just level it up quite a bit. We're pretty excited about it.
It seems obvious, but I guess it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Tom?
Love it. Love that if I get to come back to the States, we'll be going somewhere new again. Probably have to travel another couple of hours to get to somewhere from Australia. But once you've already gone like 15 hours, like what's another 2 kind of thing.
Yeah. So people can get, we're only releasing 50 early bird tickets. So if you're a vendor and you want that low price, go ahead and do that. If you're on the owner side, we're capping free owner tickets at 150 this year. And so that we expect to sell that to go probably around June, we're thinking. And so don't wait if you're on the owner side and you want to get your free tickets. That's
also don't sleep on the deal of the early bird ticket. Like we are limiting it to 50. It's about 50% of the price as the people who buy like right before. So you can save some serious money if you're a little proactive here. It's actually a really good deal.
Yep. All right. Next thing real quick before we get into Tom's presentations here is we have our next event in January. It's called Getting Control of Your Building's OT Devices. It is a new format for events. We talked about this on the podcast a couple times already. We're calling it Nexus Cast. It's basically a 4-hour virtual conference. And so we have an expo floor, we have booths, we have demos, very similar to NexusCon, except for you're sitting in your home or your office. Obviously, we can't replace the face-to-face you run into someone, in person at NexusCon, but it does hit the same sort of vibe we're trying to hit. And it's a little bit different in that NexusCon is focused on all the different tracks. We're focused on one track and really 1 or 2 specific problems that building owners are trying to solve right now. So this one's on device management, and we're still looking for a few case studies for that, right, Brad?
Yeah. So the format is that we'll have 6 building owner quick hitting case studies about what they're doing as it relates to this topic. We'll kind of go in stages of like the beginning, which is like discovery, all the way to like the remediation that people are doing about their OT devices. But yeah, we're kind of in the thick of planning that agenda right now. We're got some really good speakers already slated, but we are looking for more spots. If you're interested in speaking, we do have an application on that page. You just go to our website, and then at the top you can see the Nexus Cast, and you click there and it says, do you apply to speak, like right below the title. So if you're interested in doing that, now is the time to apply, because we're converging on what that agenda will be.
And Brad, what are the 6 steps that we're going to walk them through, putting you on the spot?
I'm prepared. So it's kind of the first version of the OT device management playbook that we've built, of like talking and interviewing multiple building owners who have approached this problem and the way that they've done it and what are those steps. So we're trying to assign the 6 case studies to the 6 steps that we've defined of device management. So it's starting with discovery of devices, then assessment of devices, classification of devices. So like, what is upstream of it? What's downstream of it? What rooms is it associated with? What other subsystems is it associated with? So those 3 steps are kind of all like discovery, auditing, like getting your shit together. And then the second 3 steps are the action phase. So remediation. So once you find your problems, what are you going to do about them? Maintenance. How do you build this so that like it's not just a one-time thing, but it's ongoing? And then standardizing, which is related to maintenance, but that's more like, how are you getting this into your specifications for your next build? How are you training people on it? How are you doing change management on it? So we're trying to match a case study to each one of those 6 steps. So we'll hear 6 different building owners say, this is how we approached this step. This is how we approached the next step, and so on. We'll get kind of this very holistic picture about how the whole industry is approaching it.
Tom, I'm wondering for you to hear this as just a community member who comes to our events, what are you thinking when you think about us doing a virtual conference? What's the thought?
I think it's fantastic because it's kind of the same problem that we've got over here in Australia. Is that it's just like the States is just so huge, and to get everybody together is a really hard thing to do. So the fact that you do NexusCon is obviously fantastic. You can get everyone there once a year, but if you're able to get everyone online together, talk about a particular topic, go really deep into that topic, it's another way for the community to connect on a regular basis, talk about a specific topic that we know is relevant, that we know is a bit of a hot topic. And we do a similar thing here in Oz. It's picking one topic and going real deep and allowing the community to nerd out on that one topic and getting the diverse opinions from owners, from consultants, from contractors, from tech vendors. So I think it's great. It's just another way that, the smart building community can learn from each other. And, if that topic is really of interest, then I'm sure people will attend.
Yeah.
The other thing I know you're thinking, Tom, is that it's at the crack of dawn, Australia time, and you're not going to actually maybe be there, but maybe some solace if you do register, and people in Tom's situation, the whole recording will be on demand afterwards. So if you register after it's over, you'll get access to be able to watch it and see what you missed. I did want to bring up one other thing too, is like, we've been doing virtual events at at Nexus Labs since before I was here. Obviously, James, you've been doing this forever. They've got a good reputation. It's like very open, everybody gets a chance to speak. They're great. They've been like basically just Zoom calls where we're just maybe use the breakout session thing, and people love them. But like, I just want to make sure our audience understands like how much we're leveling it up on this Nexus cast. This is not just like a Zoom call where everyone's going to be on it. We have created a program where we'll have a stage where people will come on and off, and we'll have a demo stage, and we're going to have virtual booths that you can go, and free time to network with other people. And like, it's very curated to be as close to NexusCon as possible, although it's remote. So I think it's going to be pretty cool.
Yes, we have gone through a whole tech procurement process to find the software that allows us to be as close to in person as possible while allowing everyone to sit at their own computer. So, all right, let's jump into Tom's presentations. Tom, you were a part of 3 different sessions at NexusCon. We really worked you hard. Wow.
Yeah, if you're going to make the journey all the way over, you might as well squeeze every bit of juice out of it as possible.
Yeah. So let's start with the first one. You shared Lendlease's cybersecurity journey. I haven't watched that one yet, but Brad has. So let's dive into that. Tell me about it.
Yeah, this was really, cybersecurity. Not only is it just a bit of a hot topic, but it's been the cornerstone of, I suppose, the rework technology strategy that we've deployed at Lendlease Investment Management. It's when we were coming up with a revised tech strategy, and we really wanted to sort of pick a starting point, like, where are we going to start with, right? Like, there's so many areas of technology where I think you could start. And for me, the sort of obvious starting point before you go and think about all these kind of different types of technologies, whether it's platforms or networks or data layers or device management, whatever it might be, I think starting with cybersecurity is the logical starting point. So before you start thinking about value creation with technology, start thinking about value protection and risk mitigation. That'll be equally as important, if not more important, particularly on the owner's side of things. So this was really the cornerstone of the strategy that we pitched to our fund managers, that we pitched to our business, that we got approval for. And we started this journey back in FY25, which is kind of sort of 1 July 2024. So it's been about a year and a half that we've been through this journey. And it was really about presenting how did we take, or I suppose, how do we come up with our program and how do we break it down into phases or scopes of work to deploy over multiple financial years. And we sort of talked through that whole program and how we sort of switched around the starting point there. So, and it was, I actually loved being a part of that session. There were some excellent presenters who went on before me, who talked about some of the horror stories of cybersecurity, which is probably the best starting point for that discussion, because whilst we can talk about the things to do and the steps to take, it was the wonderful presentations by Joe and others talking about, like, why do we care about cyber security? And I think Joe in particular went through some of the incredible cybersecurity attacks that had happened in commercial real estate. And I think for a lot of building owners in particular is that maybe they feel like, I think they still get asked the question like, like, why do we have to do this? Like, do we really need to invest in cybersecurity? It's just OT. Like, is someone just going to come on and flick a light switch on and off or change a temperature on a BMS? Is that all they're going to do? So there's a lack of understanding, as to the threat, the impact, and the severity of what happens with a cybersecurity attack. And Joe really helped point out what the real sort of value prop here is and what the real impact is. And when he started talking about the fact that leasing deals, the ability to attract and retain tenants, is now actually impacted by the fact that, if a building has a cybersecurity attack, maybe you won't get a tenant to re-sign that lease, or you won't be able to attract a new tenant into that building. And that building, that organization then becomes synonymous with the fact that they aren't able to secure their base building OT systems. And if you start losing leasing deals, that's when you'll start pricking the ears of, the asset and the fund managers across the building owner organizations.
I should have said at the beginning of this that anyone that wasn't there, which includes me, we are working on posting all the recordings from NexusCon. So you will get an email from us. And if you're a Nexus Pro member, which is $350 a year, but it includes other stuff as well, you will be able to watch Tom's recording and Joe's recording and all the other presentations at the conference and all of our other events. Yeah.
Yep. And to promote kind of the story that Tom is telling here, you mentioned in your presentation, you secured over 125 OT systems across 12 million square feet of buildings in less than 6 months. So, like, to other building owners listening, like, this was a massive, large scale thing that you overtook. I wanted to kind of ask you one part about it. You talked about how you followed the NIST 5-step process, which is like nearly identical to the 6-step process that we're going to be going over in NexusCast. NIST is identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. But what I thought was really interesting is you kind of gave a golden nugget insight to other building owners about how, it's identify and then protect, but how you kind of got this advice that, well, the identification, the audit phase is going to tell you to secure all of your OT cloud connected systems anyway. So just start with action to show results rather than waiting for this audit. Can you kind of talk through how that went and why you flipped those 2 steps?
Yeah. When we were looking to put together the OT cyber program, as you mentioned, we wanted to leverage an existing framework and be able to then take that framework and build it out into a scope of work. And there are numerous standards and frameworks out there, but the one that really resonated with us in terms of developing a program of works was the NIST framework. And we probably don't have the time to sort of deep dive into all the elements of that framework. But as you mentioned, it's got this wonderful 5-step process. And typically, not just NIST, but you could argue a lot of frameworks, they typically start with some kind of identify or audit or investigation step as step one, which is like figure out what you've got, like understand your current state. And in the world of OT cyber, this often means starting with some kind of physical site audit coupled with a vulnerability assessment that you would run on your OT systems to really identify, how many servers, how many devices, how many things do you have in your OT systems, and are there any vulnerabilities associated with those devices? And so when we put together the program of work initially, we had as our first step to do this big audit piece up front. As in, we would run an RFP, we would select a vendor, and that vendor would then go to each of our buildings. They would do a physical audit, see how the OT systems are architected, how cybersecurity are, effectively determine their cybersecurity posture, and then run a vulnerability assessment across every single OT system that they could find. And then the second step is then protect, which is then, okay, now that you've run the audit and you've figured out, where your vulnerabilities are at, then you start doing some remediation work, you start doing some level of protection. And then when we started, when we put together that initial or sort of draft scope of work, we then presented that to some subject matter experts that we knew over here in the industry. And they all gave us the same bit of feedback, was that don't wait for the outcome of a lengthy audit process to actually start protecting and uplifting the cybersecurity posture of these buildings. If you don't have the two fundamental elements of a firewall and secured how your tenants, your contractors, and your FMs remotely access those OT systems, then go ahead and just do that thing. Because if you run an audit, you do that vulnerability assessment, it'll pick up the fact that anything that's exposed to the internet, you need to protect it from the internet. And it will pick it up as the most critical thing to do. So if you already know the outcome of that audit and what it's going to put at the very top of that priority tree, you don't need to wait for the outcome of that audit. Just simply go ahead and do it. They said, get your firewalls in and make sure you have secured your remote access methods. And so it was based off that advice that we heard from numerous people that we then flipped that first and second phase around. So we started with protection, and then the audit piece has actually come afterwards. And so we ran an RFP where we've deployed the Neve Secure Remote Access solution across, it was 19 buildings covering 12 million square feet. And over 125 OT systems we would now consider sufficiently protected in terms of the firewalls that they've got in place and how all those external parties remotely access those systems.
It's awesome. And then just from like you mentioned how it accelerated things, but also just from like a program management perspective, you're able to have this quick win like right away because you started with just action rather than this like 100-page audit where you're going to get permission to do all these things. You haven't actually had any wins yet. Like that made a lot of sense to kind of prime the pump with some wins to make the program keep moving.
Yeah, it's essential for any program that you are able to demonstrate value back to asset and fund managers quickly, because they give you a whole bunch of money. You have to go back and tell them how well you've spent that money, right? And what value that they've got for it, because that then helps unlock funding for future phases of the program. So we saw this as a win on multiple fronts, and the ability to demonstrate value quickly. As we said, the vendor that we selected was able to deploy that secure remote access solution across those 19 buildings, those 125 OT systems in less than 6 months. We got rid of a whole bunch of legacy VPNs and port forwarding and all these things that effectively just punch holes in your cyber security posture really quickly. And then we were able to go back to the asset and fund managers before our next budget cycle began and actually say, hey, remember all that money that you gave us to actually improve the cybersecurity posture of the buildings? Well, here's the results. We've been able to do it in 6 months before the start of the next budget cycle. Great. Thank you very much. We understand. Well done. Can you now give us more money to then actually contribute towards the next stages of the program? And we were able to do that. And now we're getting going with that second phase. We're right at the start now of the audit and the vulnerability assessment phase. And we're going to hope to then unlock future funding in future financial years to continue the further stages of that program.
Nice.
That's awesome.
That is so directly connected to what our Nexus Cast, content will be about. You shared the story pretty well. It sounds like you guys are very much on that, like those first steps of discovery and then remediation. What would you look for us to cover during that Nexus Cast on the whole life cycle of OT device management? Like, is there anything that stands out that you want to make sure that we get within that event?
I think the 6 steps that you've outlined, I think just even providing that initial guidance to everybody, I think is kind of the key first step, right? Like it's always the case of what's the starting point. I think that's sometimes the hardest thing, and people have different ideas about what is the right starting point. And I think the thing that I think Nexus Labs has always done a really great job of is figuring out how to provide a bit of a North Star to people, right? Like it's not giving specific advice around how to do it, but it's providing that sort of North Star around, well, how do you start? What needs to be included in that program? And, how do you get to that kind of endpoint there? So I think for me, it's again, you provided that kind of guidance around, look, here's what we think is that North Star. And then you guys need to now go away and figure out how how to develop your own strategy, your own program. How long will it take? And the thing that kind of resonated with me the most when I sort of read through that 6-step program is the governance piece. Like I think people sort of understand the identification piece and figuring out like what do you actually have in your buildings and your assets. But the hardest piece, I think, with any technology program is kind of like, how do you take an idea or something that you want to change, and then how do you manage that change and actually get it into effect and into action? And that's where the building owner and the vendors that they partner with have to take a lot of that responsibility, right? It's how do you then get it into effect, whether you specify it into a service contract, whether you create standards and specs. Great, like get those things into the contractual documents that matter. But unless you have a governance program in place to police it, to manage it, to report the success of it, then you're never going to get that change management done correctly. And I think for me, that's the bit that we're still trying to figure out what we're going to do, is that, once we've identified all these devices, we've figured out the vulnerabilities, and we've figured out, what's our current state. It's how do we then get to that end state, and how do we actually start changing how our vendors and our contractors manage their devices and change their behaviors? Because the behavioral change is always going to be the hard bit. The selection of the technology and the procurement of it is always going to be the easier bit. And so that's the bit that kind of struck a chord with me, the fact that you've got that in there. But each organization is going to have to figure out how they actually do that governance piece. And I think what I hope you'll tease out of that Nexus Cast session is some great ideas from owners and vendors and contractors around how to do that.
Love that. I love that. This actually gets to your second presentation at NexusCon, which I felt was more not necessarily talking about any specific technology. It's more program management related. Do you want to give a quick overview of that presentation? The anatomy of a failed smart building project, which is provocative. I like it. Spicy.
Yeah. Look, it's all around, it was all sort of based around sort of sharing the learnings that, from initiatives that I'd, personally been involved in, both tech vendor side and building owner side, around like, why do initiatives fail? And I think, one of the great things that Nexus has done is always sort of encourage people to be candid, not just around celebrating the wins and the successes, but trying to teach people around how to do things better and the lessons learned and how do we do better next time. And so when I thought about, what to present on, I really wanted to sort of dive into, well, why do initiatives fail? And it actually sort of got spurred, James, from a question that you actually put out into the LinkedIn universe. I think it was earlier this year, where you actually put a survey out to the audience and said, who do you think is more responsible for why an initiative fails? Do you think it's more on the tech vendor side, or do you think it's more on the building owner side? And I think the result of that survey was that 70% of people thought it was actually on the building owner side, and the tech vendors were only 30% responsible for it. Yeah, it was. Now, I don't know if the people that were responding to that survey were maybe more tech vendors who thought like, oh, yeah, our product's great. It's definitely on the owner's side of things as to why these things fail. But it kind of got me thinking, and then it got me retrospectively thinking about some of the initiatives I've been a part of. And when I started to analyze the reasons why these initiatives failed, I saw that it wasn't just solely just the owner's fault, and it wasn't just the tech vendor's fault. It was a shared responsibility. Somewhere along the line, the tech vendor and the building owner diverged in terms of what they thought success was, things that had gone wrong, and the relationship and the technology just wasn't able to marry up in the way that people thought it was going to happen. And so we sort of dove into that analysis, right? And then really paired that with some case studies of particular technologies, and then I asked the audience, did you think for this particular scenario, do you think it was more on the tech vendor side of things, or do you think it was more the building owners reason why this failed? And people, it was like a 50-50 split kind of thing. Like some people thought the vendors, some people thought the owner, and it sort of showed the audience that it is a shared responsibility, right? Like it's never a case from the tech vendor's point of things that, they've deployed the technology, they've given it over to the building owner. It's over to you guys, right? So the success depends on you. And if this fails, it's not on us. Like we've done our job. And I still see that in a few tech vendors today that have that kind of mentality of, we've got you onboarded, we've trained you up, over to you guys now to run it. If you're not keeping tabs with your client and you're figuring out where the problems are, maybe why things aren't working, and you're not investing the time on your side to ensure that you've reached that mutually agreed point of value, then unfortunately you may not get that renewal. Like it might last a year or two or three, but you might not get the renewal at the end of that contract term, and that owner might be looking for one of your competitors. And I think we see a lot of that in the industry. Like people run a technology maybe for the initial contract term, if it's 3 years or 5 years, and then they go out to market again. And tech vendors should be asking themselves, well, why are they going out to market again? Is it because they feel like they just have to stress test the market, or is it because they actually think they can get something better, or there's something missing? Mm-hmm. So, and then on the owner's side of things, yeah, like owners also need to share the responsibility here if particularly the tech vendor hasn't lived up to the sales and marketing material that they put in front of you during the sales cycle. I think historically, I'd argue that owners and operators maybe haven't done a great job of actually doing their due diligence on tech vendors and figuring out exactly what the actual value prop is. And sort of, as we said, cutting through that sales and marketing fluff and figuring out exactly what you're going to get. And if you haven't done your due diligence as an owner, then that's on you as well, right? So yeah, it's this tricky sort of balancing act.
I think you're going to like some of the changes that we're going to make next year, which is the concept of playbooks and the concept of maturity moves. And when we think about all of the sessions at our events in 2026, they're going to be focused on individual playbooks. A playbook might be condition-based maintenance, for example, or HVAC sequence optimization. Like the repeatable projects that all building owners in our community are thinking about doing, or already doing, or have done, right? But then there's these concept of maturity moves that go across a program and aren't related to the playbooks individually. And so some of the ones that you covered in your presentation were more maturity moves than they were. They weren't tech. They weren't focused on any individual tech or outcome. It's really, how are you piloting projects? How are you assessing new technologies for how they might change your current workflows? How are you selecting vendors? How are you actually doing change management? How are you doing governance on the program that you're running, right? And so what we're planning on doing is not necessarily having sessions related to maturity moves, but having each session also have a maturity move component. So if someone's presenting a case study, we're going to ask them to also cover the maturity moves that they made to enable that playbook. And then when we do things like the buyer vendor symposium, I think you're going to love this, because it's not necessarily like a building owner only can do these maturity moves. They need the vendor, is what you're saying, to buy into their pilot process. So they need a vendor to buy into the change management process that they're undergoing. And so it's really helping me. Like when I listen to you, I'm like, oh yeah, this is where all this stuff fits together. And it's funny, for, having been doing this for 5 years, I feel like just in the last few months, I'm like, oh, this is how all this information needs to be organized. And yeah, you're definitely part of that, helping us figure that out. So thank you, Tom.
No problem at all. Yeah, I mean, like, you'd use a classic example of FTD, because I feel like FTD, it was amazing at Nexus. Like, I feel like FTD has just become table stakes now.
Yeah.
Something that maybe not, a lot of owners, did maybe sort of like 5-10 years ago, has now almost just become part of the course. And the best thing was that people weren't presenting around, why you should do FTD. It was all around, how do you make it a success? And it's all those change management bits that make it the success. It's the restructuring of your contracts, right? It's getting your HVAC and BMS vendors enticed to actually use it, building it into their workflows. How do you report on the true success of it and make sure that you actually, it's not just a case of just deploying the technology and leaving it up to the vendor to sort of do all the hard work for you. There's all these structural elements, all these legacy structural elements of how has maintenance been done historically? How do you actually get the vendors to just make it a part of their day-to-day? And so those are the elements that actually make an FTD program or a data-driven maintenance program a success.
Mm-hmm.
I think many people have made the mistake of just deploying the technology and hoping that they'll get the right outcome. It's getting the people that are managing it to properly ensure that that change is now being actually built into the BMS and HVAC vendors day to day, so that all of a sudden, the point that everyone wants to get to is where they're just doing it themselves. You don't almost need a managed service. You don't need a human in the loop anymore. All of a sudden, the insight goes straight to the contractor. They fix the issue and they report on the outcome. But you're not going to get there on day one. You're going to have to go through that change management process and eventually get to that endpoint, right? So yeah, that was one of the great examples that I sort of saw at NexusCon.
It's a point of pride for me, because it's one of the reasons why we created the conference in general. Like we would go to conferences. This is before Brad joined me, but like Rosie and I would go to conferences, and it was all the stuff that you talked about at the beginning there, which is like, what is FTD and why to do FTD? Like, what is smart buildings? Let's get a definition of smart buildings down. And we've sort of not forced everyone. We've invited everyone to move past that, which is all the nitty gritty stuff, which is what you find at NexusCon. So if you're listening to this out there and you want to dig into the nitty gritty with the community, that's what we do. Yeah, that's what we do. All right, we gotta close this up. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Let's end with some carve outs, something from your personal life. I'll go first. So Tom, I know you're a Tottenham fan. I'm going to just point everyone to the Premier League table as of December 9th, where Arsenal's at the top. That's my carve out. Google Premier League table. Sorry, Tom.
I need to carve out I need to get whoever's editing this podcast just to carve out that that little section.
That's your carve out.
Oh, I know. Like Tottenham are back where I remembered them for most of my life, which is kind of mid-table junk. They sort of pretended to be a good team for a few years, and like Harry Kane and Son Heung-min, I miss them dearly. I wish they came back. Why did we ever sell them? But yeah, it's always interesting. Like, yeah, they might finish 4th, they might finish 17th, they might win a trophy. But do you know what? Last season, I saw them win a trophy for the first time in, I can't even remember how long. That's how long it had been. So that was almost like a highlight of earlier this year. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, cheers.
You're welcome. Brad, what do you got?
Mine also has to do with Tom. Tom, we've been talking remotely for a long time because you've been part of the Nexus community and you've been running, events in Australia. So seeing you at NexusCon was one of my highlights, and you came on the hike, the Royal Arch hike, and we got to do most of that together, which was really cool. But what I thought was funny that I haven't got a chance to connect with you yet is that you were asking me about like what you should do with your final day in Colorado. You hadn't spent much time, or maybe it was the first time you'd been there, and you're like looking for recommendations. And I was thinking really hard based on like the amount of time you had and stuff, like what's a good recommendation. And I landed on Nederland, James, which obviously you're super familiar with, just based on the amount of time you had. I was like, you should go there. Well, the day I told you to go there, there was like a huge fire that like took out a ton of the town. Really sad. But I remember waking up and seeing the news, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, did Tom start the fire? Is Tom in the fire? Like, I was concerned that I never got a chance to talk to you about it. I don't think he went, right? I don't think that worked out.
No, he didn't go because we went out to coffee. We went out and had coffee that day.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. It was like a weird turn of events. Like, I'd hired a car. I'd organized like a hire car sort of like a couple of days before that. And my plan, was very much to do exactly what you told me to do. And then when I woke up that morning, I went to the car hire place, which was just down the road from where the conference was. I got there and they had no cars available. And they like run out of cars. And I thought, like, how do you run out of cars in America? Like, this has just got to be like an insane thing. And so
blessing
I got
in disguise.
It was a blessing in disguise. And then I got back to the hotel and I bumped into Christian Nielsen, great guy that I met at the conference. And as you said, Brad, my highlight of that whole conference was actually just meeting a whole bunch of people that I'd only ever known in 2 dimensions up until that point, including yourselves. Christian was one of those great guys that I met, and he was keen to go for a hike. And so we actually just went back to the starting point of the hike the previous day, and then we just hiked up one of the other Flatirons, is it called? Yeah, cool. which was great. And then we sort of did the hike, that beautiful view over Boulder and the whole of Colorado, and then we caught up and changed for a quick coffee before literally having to get to the airport and jump on a plane back to Oz. So that was a great way to kind of end it all.
All right, Tom, you got a carve out?
My carve out was going to be some kind of baby hack, but I think after hearing all of that, I think my carve out is actually just going to be getting to Nexus. Like honestly, getting to Nexus, meeting a whole bunch of awesome people over those sort of 3-4 days. I felt like if we had like another 3-4 days, could have met even more people. It was almost overwhelming. But for me, also getting to the Rockies, like getting to the Rockies and getting to Colorado has been a dream of mine forever. Like the mountains, the skiing. If you'd done NexusCon in winter, I probably would struggle to actually go to the event. I'd probably just be up on the hill on the skis. So I just just had a brilliant time for like 3-4 days or so. And who knows if you do end up doing NexusCon back in Denver again and doing the hikes and all that kind of stuff, I thought it was brilliant.
All right. Tom Balme was not paid in the production of this podcast, but he says come to NexusCon next year. All right. Well, thanks, Tom. We'll release you to the beginning of your day as we end ours over here on the other side of the earth. Good to see you, buddy.
Okay, friends, thank you for listening to this episode. As we continue to grow our global community of changemakers, we need your help. For the next couple of months, we're challenging our listeners to share a link to their favorite Nexus episode on LinkedIn with a short post about why you listen. It would really, really help us out. Make sure to tag us in the post so we can see it. Have a good one.